Welcome back to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Today, we have two guests, Mitch Whiting and Nate Randle. This is a totally crazy story about how a small request to follow someone on LinkedIn shifted the course of my entire life. You are not going to want to miss what these two incredible guys have to share. Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization. All right, welcome everyone to the show. I am honored to be with two incredible people on the show today, my good friend Mitch Whiting and Nate Randle. Welcome, guys, and thanks so much for being willing to come on.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Yeah, so grateful. Two of my favorite people, truly.
Yeah, so we're going to kick this off a little bit unconventionally, and I'm just going to share a quick story about Nate and Mitch and ultimately why we are together today. So in the summer of 2022, my cousin had texted us and said, hey, can we stop by on our way out of town? So her and her family came by, and me and her husband started a conversation around leadership and culture because that's normal. Like, what else would we be thinking about or talking about? And he casually mentions, hey, you ought to go look up Nate Randle on LinkedIn. I follow him. We use Gab products and like, he's awesome. Well, I haven't been on LinkedIn in years at this point. And so I went and revived my LinkedIn profile and did that. I followed Nate Randle and, read some of his most recent posts and was like, yeah, Brad was right. Like, this guy's a cool leader. And so what that did though, is it kept me coming back to LinkedIn because I realized how wholesome of a platform LinkedIn was. And then because of my, at that point, connection with Nate, so many of the other people kind of in the, what I would refer to as the LinkedIn community, I was exposed to them as well. And after a couple of months, started following Mitch and got connected with Mitch. And then later that year, actually reached out to Mitch and hired Mitch as the first coach that I had ever hired. And so I think back to where things were at that time in my life and where things are now. And I almost just am completely mind blown at how many decades we have compressed into a short amount of days. I mean, that wasn't even 2 years ago when I started following Nate, and not even barely 18 months ago that I reached out to Mitch. So we had always planned to have a moment where we share this story with the world. And I'm so grateful that both of you were able to be on today. And
Matt, tell me more about why this was so pivotal for you, why this made such an impact, why you imagined someday sharing this with Nate for the first time on a podcast or on the stage.
Yeah, I geek out about stories and the power of stories. And so I've been living in this story, and I've been excited to share this story because it's so powerful, because of the impact that you can have without knowing it. And so Nate, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you wake up every morning wondering like, who am I going to impact intentionally on LinkedIn today? And yet you wake up every morning, how am I going to be a powerful leader today? How am I going to be present today? How am I going to share what's meaningful in the world? And that's what ends up making the difference. So any thoughts about that, Nate? Like, hearing this story now and how you strive to show up on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, first of all, Matt, I'm honored. It's very cool that you'd reach out, that you'd share that with me. I'll shoot you very straight on how I feel about LinkedIn and a lot of public platforms. I often think, should I just fade away? Should I not do it anymore? It takes a lot of time. It takes effort. Being public has its downsides, which I won't go into here, but there's been plenty of times where I felt like I'm just not making an impact anymore. And there's other places where I could privately go do that as well. And so I'm just going to go do that. And so to hear from really thoughtful people like you that reach out and want to have a conversation like this, it's the reason that I do keep showing up, because if it's helping even a few, then I do genuinely feel like it's worth my time. So it's so cool to hear that a couple of years ago, when I was probably at the time processing I'm just going to take a break for a while. I need a break. To know that it connected with you means a lot.
Yeah.
I can even express here. It's very cool to hear that from you. Thank you.
I want to fill in some of the gaps here too, for the listeners that don't know Nate, that don't know you, and don't know me, potentially. What happened here without Nate knowing, while having this additional context that he had thoughts like maybe I'm not making an impact anymore, is unbelievable. And it just speaks to the power of showing up intentionally in our lives and making a difference in people's lives without ever knowing. Like, there are so many things that we will never, ever, ever understand about this life in terms of the impact that we've had, and like commonly known as the butterfly effect, right? Like the butterfly, spreads its wings and flaps, and the wind from the wings ends up making a ripple on the water and like a hurricane all the way across on the other side of, the world. And it's just like little things that we do make a massive impact later down the road. And I pulled up your testimonial, Matt, if you're okay with me sharing this, of like what
Yeah.
you experienced because your cousin said, get on LinkedIn, which you were not on. It's just so cool that Nate's content got you to get on a platform that you weren't even spending on time on just to learn from him. And then we got connected as a result. And I share your testimonial with the world all the time because your story is so incredible. And so I'll read it here. You said, since working with Mitch, I often refer to myself as the new Matt. The old Matt had the passion, fire, and work ethic needed to succeed, but something was missing. I had read all the books, done the exercises, and sought advice from trusted mentors, but I was still stuck. I felt like a fraud. Mitch showed me the tools and frameworks I was missing to have the mindset I needed. Now I am in control of my thoughts and emotions. The changes I am making on myself are impacting my marriage more than anything I have ever done. Being the new Matt is exhilarating. I feel like me. I feel free from other people's expectations, and I'm doing what I want to do and being who I really am. I want everyone to experience the transformation and liberation that I have. So this is like unbelievable, the change that
So,
you experienced in your life. And it started with Nate posting on LinkedIn, feeling like maybe he's not making an impact and taking risks in his personal life to be public. And there's cons to that, right? And there's a downside to that. And I was thinking about you today and just thinking how your light when I met you was dimmed. Your light was dimmed, right? It wasn't not within you, it was just dimmed. And when you learned how to control your thoughts and emotions and to step into possibility and shed the limitation in your life, your good friend and business partner, Chris Smith, right? He came over to your house and he said, you were talking, and he said, hey, my 14-year-old son, I asked him who is a light in your life. And he said, Matt Harrington, because you're his youth leader. And he said, my son's BS radar is so high that when he said that, I knew, like, you're a true light. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's when you decided to be business partners and to create this incredible company together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And unbeknownst to him and Nate, for your context and for everyone hearing this story, I had specifically mentioned those 14-year-old boys in the very first time I ever talked to Mitch about like the reason why I wanted to like shift who I was being and how I was showing up in the world, because I really want to have an impact on them. So it was really rewarding to have Chris say that when he didn't know that I had specifically, been working on that, targeting that, just a month or two earlier. So yeah, it's incredible. So, so Nate, thank you.
well,
This is,
thank you.
so-
You're the one that dug in and made some adjustments, and I think that's what's so cool about somebody who says, I want to be better or I want to be more fulfilled, and then they actually go do it. There's so many people that talk, but how many people actually put it into action? And if it were easy, as we all say, everybody would do it. But to dig in and improve and make changes is really hard. It's really hard. And it's why most people just stay comfortable in whatever they're in, even if they're not happy, because it's just easier to stay there than put in the work. So kudos to you for, I appreciate a small piece of the credit that you're giving me. Kudos to you for putting in the work. That's where the change really happened.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I really feel like this story helps demonstrate, and I believe that it's even helping you see a bigger vision of what's possible with the impact that you have had and are having on people, that we just never know. You just never know the impact you're going to have on someone when you're just consistently or even inconsistently showing up in a powerful way and sharing your story, like sharing what's authentic to you. And and so that's a beautiful thing. Mitch, will you share the story that you shared with me a while back about being at a mastermind and running into someone who you didn't know?
Yeah, so I with my good friend Richie Norton, if you don't know him, check out his book Anti-Time Management. It's really incredible. But he and I did a joint venture together. He reached out to me and texted me and said, "Hey, I want to do a JV with you." And I was so new to entrepreneurship because I'm an accidental entrepreneur, and I had to Google what JV meant. And I texted back like, "Holy crap, yes, I would love to." And so we ended up creating what we call the Life Work Alignment Mastermind, which is a play on the myth of work-life balance. It's taking a life-first approach, not to balance, not to have equilibrium between the tug of war of life and work, but to actually create a life that's aligned. And so we created this Life Work Alignment Mastermind, and it consisted, it's now a digital course. We've just finished it this week, which we're excited to be able to launch. But for the first live experience, it was two-hour virtual mastermind sessions, and there were 40 entrepreneurs, executives, leaders, and employees that joined. Well, we capped the experience. Our capstone experience was a full day live event where everyone flew from across the country to Salt Lake City, and we had this amazing event. Well, I walk into the event and I see two men talking. One of them was one of my private clients that I had known, and then the other I didn't know. And they were talking, and I wanted to just say hi to them and meet, these amazing people that had flown in for the event. And this man turned around. When he saw me, tears started streaming down his face. And he said, he was choked up and he said, "Mitch, I've wanted to tell you this for a long time. You changed my life." And that was the full extent of what he told me until we just embraced. We just hugged. But before that happened, I had to look down at his name tag. I didn't know his name. And it was this deeply humbling moment where I was like, "Oh my gosh, like we have no idea the impact that we're making in people's lives when we show up intentionally and try to give and love and build and serve and create in the best ways we know how." And sometimes, like Nate said, we don't know if we're making an impact. I was actually having my own brain drama about like, what am I going to share today? Am I going to like present from the stage? Like, am I going to make an impact? I was asking the same thing. And yet I had this experience. And I think every single person who's listening to this podcast, especially because these are people that are leaning into stepping into possibility and letting go of limitation, you're having that impact. You're having that impact right now. We just will never know. And we get a glimpse of a few of these stories. And aren't we so grateful for that?
Yeah, totally. So that's the thing. Like this story of Nate and the story Mitch just shared, it really highlights like our most fundamental definition of leadership is our ability to help enroll people into a bigger vision of what's possible than they can see for themselves. And that's what I want to like make sure that we highlight, is that like that is what each of you have done and continue to do. Like with the way you show up and the stories you share and the authenticity you share, you help people see and continue to help people see a bigger vision of what's possible than what they can see for themselves. And then they can go step into it. And again, to Nate's point, that like is important. The stepping is important and doesn't happen if you don't step, and you don't know where to step if you can't see it. And so that's the impact that you two are having, is helping people see a bigger vision of what's possible for them than they could see for themselves. Nate, can you tell us a little bit about just what that's looked like for you over the years? I know, so for the listeners who don't know, Nate is the CEO of Gab Wireless, and an extremely successful and amazing company that provides safe tech for kids. Would you just share with us a little bit about that journey, about how you've stepped into a bigger vision of what's possible in your own life and leadership and with Gab?
Yes, and it all centers around my dad. So my dad is my second dad. He was my stepdad that married my mom after she was single for several years. And there's a history to that, and to keep it very brief, my biological dad left our family when I was 5, just based on his own personal choices. He just didn't want to be a dad. So he left, and my mom literally had nothing. And a few years later, she got remarried. And the individual she married at the time, I didn't know him well. And I was calling him Steve and trying to figure out how he was going to fit into my life as a 8-year-old kid. And then tragically, shortly after they got married, my mom passed away in a car accident. And so both of my biological parents were gone by the time I was 9. And from my perspective, I was stuck with this guy I didn't really know. My mom had been dating him, and yes, they'd been married. He certainly didn't feel like my dad, because I knew I had another dad who just wasn't showing up for me. And then over the course of time, that dad became my real dad. And he now literally is my only hero. I don't look up to athletes. I don't look up to celebrities. He's it. He's the only one that I can look to and say, that's exactly who I want to be. And part of what he taught me growing up is you can be a statistic or a standout. And by statistic, he meant most kids who lose their biological parents by the time they're 9 probably don't have a shot. And you could use every excuse in the book and become a victim and constantly be telling people that you are the way you are and you're in the place you're in because of all the trials you've been through or the tragedies that you had to deal with. Or you can dig in and I can help guide you. And if you'll listen to me, I'll love you through this.
Mm.
And now, as a 48-year-old dad of 4, I look at him and say, where would I be without him? Where would I be without his counsel and direction? Most of the decisions that I have made in my life, minor or major, have been guided by him. I don't make massive moves without him. I call him, I check in, I say, hey, I'm thinking about this or that. What do you think? And so as I've made career moves and personal decisions, he's been this guiding light, like this compass for me, that has been a massive gift from God that I'm constantly just giving thanks for. So how did I get to Gab? And I don't want to be too long-winded here. I had a 20+ year career in sports, and it was incredible. The only thing I really care about outside of my family is sports. I don't watch the Cooking Channel. I'm not an HGTV guy. History Channel is nice to fall asleep to, but I only watch sport. I only care about sports. So I had this really nice run in sports, but it's hard to make a difference. You can give free tickets to kids and you can be involved in philanthropic things. But I wanted to do something in my career that truly made a difference. And when I heard about Gab, it was an immediate answer to being a part of something that is truly changing lives. So I'll stop there. I appreciate you asking the question, but summarizing, I have the best dad in the world who, on paper or a birth certificate, isn't my biological dad, but he's everything.
Yeah.
When I've made career decisions to hopefully be in a place to be able to give back and make a difference now.
Yeah. You are. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Like, what an incredible example of someone who's willing to help someone else see what's possible and then live into it. I love even the fact, Nate, that he's not your biological father. Like, it just stood out to me when you said, like, on your birth certificate, it's not him. Leadership has nothing to do with your role or title.
And actually it is now because he adopted me.
Yeah.
He
Right.
went back and changed it. So he got his name on the certificate. But talk about, I mean, he's just unreal.
Yeah.
He's the best example of how to treat others and how to live a life that is a living legacy.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. No, I really want everyone listening to catch that like, if Steve is saying to himself, well, I'm not Nate's biological father, so what role do I play here? Right? If we're so attached to like the title, then we miss the opportunity to be a leader.
Nope.
So I just think that that's amazing that he was able to not even consider that. It's like, I can show up for a leader, like a leader for this kid, and I'm going to.
Even even further, you don't need a certificate. He was your father way before his name was on that paper,
Totally.
Yeah.
right? And you don't need someone to give you a piece of paper to tell you you can do something. It's about who you are being and how you're showing up. And it's by doing the work, by being who you want to be, that you become qualified for that role. He wasn't qualified to be your real dad the moment all that happened, but he sure stepped into it. And every single day he became more qualified. And it just, I got so emotional when you said that Steve, your dad, looked at you and said, "Hey, you can make every excuse, but if you will listen to me, I will love you through this." I had a consultation with an old friend, and friend is a generous term because we were roommates and it was hard, really hard. This individual I did not know had been through a lot of suffering at a very young age and carried that into us being um, companions on the mission, on my mission. I served a Christian mission and we were roommates for about 6 weeks. And this individual I tried to love, I just did. I loved so hard, even though he would reject my love over and over and over again. And he booked a consultation to meet with me. And when I saw his name, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, this can't be the same person. Like, he hates me. Like, I just truly thought, like, this person does not like me. And we have a consultation, and I just showed up like, I'm just gonna love without attachment, no agenda. I'm just gonna like just love this person again and see what happens. And we talked about our past. He told me about some things that he had been through and how he brought that into being roommates with me and how hard his suffering was that I didn't know because he definitely wasn't going to open up to me at that time because he was rejecting me as his roommate and friend. And at one point of the conversation, he said he's still very active in his faith in following God. And he said, I attribute the fact that I'm still following God to you to this day. And I was like, what? Like, that was the last thing I expected him to say. But then he said this. He said, your love wore me down. Your love wore me down. And I just saw that in Steve. Like, you were a hurting child and he loved you and he wore down your heart and your walls and your limitations to accepting him. And it's just I really think love is the answer to leadership. And that is such a weird thing to say in the corporate world, right? Like, we don't get in boardrooms and say, like, how can we love each other more? But we should, because it really is the answer and what true leadership is about.
And this is coming from someone who doesn't even believe in should. So,
Yeah, I know. I know,
yeah.
because that's really a shame. It's really a shame word. And I thought about it. Like, well, it's okay.
Yeah. Nate, can you speak to that a little bit about, Mitch brings up a great point, something that I believe all three of us share a belief in, which is that love is leadership, leadership is love, and how you've seen that in, being a part of a large organization that's rapidly growing and extremely successful. How have you been able to work that in a way that works in that world?
So Mitch is right. It's hard in a corporate setting to say, let's love people more because that can be interpreted in all different types of ways. And people can spin it and try to make it a negative that you're using love to manipulate. And I mean, who knows where people go with things these days. So here on our leadership team, we just always talk about our people. We don't call them employees.
Mm,
And I think when you think of your people as genuine people that are in your circle trying to do good and grow a business together, you view them differently. And if you care about your people, I used to make the mistake of calling work, if I was having a positive experience, my work family.
Mm.
mhm,
And I realized that what I was doing was making our people feel guilty because they were letting their work family down.
mm,
So I shifted and started focusing on the teammate concept. And what that allowed us to do is say, look, we're teammates. And at work, we give everything to support each other and uplift each other and win together. But at the end of the day, I want you to leave your teammates and I want you to go home to what matters most. If that's a family, a partner, roommates, whoever may be in your life, you deserve the opportunity to leave work and go give your very best somewhere else to what should matter more to you. And that's how we've shown love. That's how I've tried to show love over the course of my career is focusing on the fact that work is not everything and that everyone can't be expected to operate or care at the same level that I may be caring because of my roles and responsibilities, and understanding what they can give and what their level of commitment should be, and then allowing them and being willing to say, go home. I'll walk around here at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And if there are people here, I'll say, go home to your families, go home to what matters most. And then if they have something in their life that matters to them, a kid's choir concert or a track meet that happens at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, go. Don't miss those things. Go be a part of it because that's what matters to who matters most. So it's through some flexibility of schedule, wanting people to show up for who they really care about, and then helping them to realize that work actually should not be the most important thing in your life, adds up to this combination of loving people and wanting them to be at their very best without saying, every day I love you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
show them,
show them.
show them.
Yeah, Matt, you taught me that true leadership is not just supporting, but also challenging. A leader challenges and supports. And that support is saying, like, I love you, right? And like giving this warm feeling around the office that someone could mistake you as a family, a work family for. But we don't just love people as true leaders. We also challenge them by saying, hey, your family is more important than the work you're doing here. I know it's important what we're doing, but it doesn't compare with what's happening in your own home with your family or your partner or your relationships or your friends, whatever is most important to you. And that's really challenging them.
Yeah. It's incredible. Nate, can you speak a little bit to, because I know that a lot of people hear this and they want to understand how they can show up as a loving leader and grow their business. And we know that it's an and, right? And so can you speak to that about how it's not an or, it doesn't have to be an either or, and how focusing on people as people and leading with love can actually result in growing a very profitable and successful business?
Yeah, my answer may be different than what some would anticipate. I've learned that to give my very best to everybody here and to be a loving and thoughtful leader so that they can have the best experiences of their career here at Gab or wherever we may be working together as teammates, I have to be at my very best. I have to take care of me. And for me, that includes getting a workout in every day. It includes thought and prayer and meditation. It includes trying to be a present dad and father as best I can. It includes serving in the community. If I'm doing those things, then when I show up to work, I'm feeling fulfilled in my personal life, and then I can pour everything into what I do here at work. When I'm not doing those things and I feel like I'm behind and everything feels extremely heavy and my personal life feels like it's in chaos or like I'm not in control of things, then I show up here and I'm frazzled and everything's at a code red 10. Everyone can feel my stress. And I've realized that when I bring a heavy load of stress in, it amplifies everyone else's stress. They're like, oh, Nate's stressed. So now everything he says is amplified. And then I'll find out at the end of a given day, somebody will say, well, Nate said in a meeting. I'm like, oh, that wasn't even an important thing I said. I must have said it in a way with stress and kind of anxiety or amplified attention to it that we got to be, and then everyone runs and acts on that. And I didn't even really mean it at that level. So taking care of myself mentally and physically so that I can come in here and be calm and comfortable in what we're trying to do is extremely important to allow others to be their best.
Yeah. It's such a valuable thing, such a myth around this in our society, right? That by taking care of ourselves, it's actually one of the most unselfish things we could do and not the opposite.
Yep.
And when we're willing to fill our own cup, we bless our people, our team with the overflow instead of being depleted by just continually draining what we have to offer. It's incredible. Mitch, I feel like I hear you, or I see you post about self-care at times. Would
Yeah.
love your thoughts about that, about how we can actually make that shift. Because I think a lot of people intuitively get it and they still find a guilt around like spending time on them and focusing on them to fill up their cup.
Yeah, self-care is not People get so mad at me when I say this. Some people do. I say self-care is not bubble baths and face masks, although those things are great. But I think true self-care is doing the inner work to become, and I believe that you can't become a better version of yourself. I wanted to say become your best self. I believe that you can't become a better version of yourself. You can only become more of who you really are. Like Michelangelo spoke of his sculptor David. He didn't sculpt David. He took everything away that wasn't David. And it's the amount of time that we're spending in a suffering state of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, self-doubt, hesitation, procrastination, judgment, limitation, shame, that is everything that's not us. And as we learn how to do the inner work to be able to shed that outer statue, we discover who we really are, which is, like, in the words of an amazing leader 2000 years ago, Jesus Christ, he said to become as a little child. And a little child has everything that you and I and everybody actually wants is already there. They're so energized and filled with passion for life that when they wake up, they have to wake up everyone else in the house. Happens every morning in our home. They're so energized and full of life that they don't want bedtime to come. They say, I don't want to go to bed. I'm not tired. And I know they're tired because they're crying as we're brushing teeth and they're exhausted. But they say, one more book, one more book, one more book, one more book. And they have no concept of failure, no concept of limitation. They get up every time they fall down. They're not comparing themselves to others, right? They don't care about titles. They don't care if they're a toddler or a baby, and they are quick to forgive and fascinated and constantly curious and wanting to learn why, dad, why, dad, why, dad, right? So we see all these like amazing indicators in little children of who we want to be. And the reason why I think that's important to share is because it's not about being your best self. It's about being who you really are by letting go of the limitation and stepping into possibility. And similar to Nate, like I realized I had to make a different decision in my life, which was to not put work first, and that it wasn't this put my family first or work first. It really was put my family first and then be able to over deliver at work. And it really is like a yes and type of situation. And because of a loving mentor that I had who told me that work was their fifth priority, and my jaw dropped. He's like, I tell my managers that, the executives know that, and he's the highest performer and has been for years. And they all know that work is his fifth priority. And I'm like, I'm going to try that on. I was in a job transition. I had left corporate Walmart. I'm going to a new company, and I decided work would be my fifth priority. And for me, my order was God, family, health, hobbies, and then work. So like for my manager to know that hobbies are more important to me than work was a scary thing to communicate, right? I was like terrified. I'm like, I'm going to lose my job, but I'm going to stick to this because I think it's important. And so then by the time I was fulfilled with God, fulfilled with family, fulfilled with health, and fulfilled with hobbies, work was now my next greatest passion. And every day in my last job before I left my corporate career behind to be a full-time entrepreneur, every day I walked out of the parking garage into the office and I told myself, this job is my greatest passion. And that was only true at that time because all my other passions were fulfilled and my cup was filled and it was pouring out into others. And I didn't just have enough time to be able to do my job well. I had enough time to connect and know all the names of everyone in the company and to truly love people and have like real relationships. And that happened because I was willing to have self-care, or to be not my best self, but who I really am, by letting go of limitation and stepping into possibility.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And last thing I'll say, I had 2 promotions in 10 months and tripled my income. So if we want to say it really is like a yes, right? Like yes, and we can have it all when we truly become who we really are. I always say the secret of becoming is that achievement always follows. When you focus on achievement, you lose the guarantee of achievement because you burn out, you try to cut corners, you work too hard, and then it just doesn't work. It's too forced. But then when you focus on becoming who you really are, success becomes inevitable. And that's what I've experienced over and over again.
Yeah. So many gold nuggets in there for sure. Well, we have just a few minutes as we wrap up. I would love for each of you to share, and we'll start with you, Nate. When you look to the future at what is possible, what's there for you right now? What's something that you are excited for as you look to the future and you look to step into what's possible?
You mind if I flip it on you for a second? I'm more interested in
Yeah.
asking you a question.
Yeah.
You've such a great job of serving up questions to us. When you look back 2 years ago, where you were and what you're experiencing now, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest personal changes that you feel, not necessarily physically, but just emotionally and who you're showing up as every day? What are the changes that have happened? What have you seen that has put you in a better place?
Yeah. No, thank you. Love that question. One of the most fundamental things that comes to mind when I think about that is, and Steve Chandler says that all of us only have fundamentally the same problem, and it's that we believe things that aren't true. And so the most initial thing that I can recognize going back to like the work that I did with Mitch and kind of that pivotal moment was challenging my beliefs and my thoughts and recognizing that I was believing things about myself and others that just simply weren't true. It's the big, like that's the biggest first thing that comes to my mind. And then because of that awareness, there comes this like responsibility of like, I am 100% responsible for my entire life right now. And that can be a little bit heavy, a little bit confronting. And in fact, even people listening right now may be like, but no, I want to find someone else to blame or someone else to take. And it's like, no, actually, it's the best place to be in because then you're 100% responsible and capable for what you want it to be tomorrow. And be, so the realization that I'm believing things that aren't true and recognizing and identifying what those are and replacing them with what is true, taking 100% responsibility for everything 100% of the time in my life allowed me to really step into what I want and what's actually true. And now it's just the climb. It's the climb on the mountain with no top of recognizing what resistance I have, what attachment I have, what limitation I have, and reminding myself who I really am to keep climbing and stay in possibility as much as possible. Again, I really think that there's an opportunity to shift from we operate in limitation with the occasional jolt into excitement, joy, possibility. And we can flip that to where we're truly operating in possibility in a fulfilled way. And yeah, we're going to have the occasional drop into limitation. And that shift has been amazing and it's real. And I want everyone to be able to experience that.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing, man. That's what it's all about, is finding that you can be in a better space and you can actually stay there
Mhm.
if you keep perspective. And
Totally.
if you realize that it's a journey and not just a quick fix. I think everybody today wants that quick fix. And I can't think of one thing that matters to me that's been a quick fix. Every single thing that matters to me has been hard. So thanks for sharing that. I'll let you ask Mitch his final question. I have no further comments or questions.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, take it away, Mitch.
Um, Remind me of your question. I got so wrapped into those beautiful truths.
Yeah, just when you look at what's next and what's possible for you next, Mitch, how do you see that and how do you continue to remain present while also stepping into what's possible in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the creator of the anti-goal mindset, how to achieve massive results without setting goals. So it's I always people always kind of laugh once they realize they've asked me like what's next and what my goals are because I don't have any. It's really for me, it's this journey of like you said, identifying the resistance in my life and rewiring my brain to permanently change it. To like actually have, like Nate said, to not just change, but to stay in that change by holding perspective of what's true and real. And I've discovered a process that I call going beyond self help, which I think is perfectly named. It's helpful, it's temporarily motivating, and inspiring, but ultimately doesn't deliver on the promised transformation because we often don't stay in that space. We revert back to our old beliefs and patterns. And so we move from self help to self transformation by learning how to not just reframe our thoughts, but rewire our brain. And that's my journey every day. I'm just stripping away the resistance to become who I really am And my vision for my life and what's possible for me next is just the way I say it, rolling around acting like a puppy on the floor with my kids as much as possible. Like that's really what matters to me. And I know the more that I do that and the more I love within my own home, I show up just like Nate was saying. I show up for others in a way that is so dramatically different that it has an impact in the world that I could not have comprehended from my present self because I'm showing up in a way that's powerful. And when from a powerful state, you can do nothing but create powerfully. And so I just see possibility, limitless possibility for what's ahead. I don't know, like you and I talked about, we almost don't recognize ourselves every 6 weeks because of the work we're doing. And it's actually not true. We actually recognize who we really are more than we ever have every 6 weeks. And it's this beautiful way of approaching life. But who knows what's possible, but I can't wait to receive it. And I'll be receiving it from the floor while I'm acting like a puppy.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right. Well, for everyone listening, we collectively, and I'll be the voice for this at this moment, want all of you to know that what you do, and more importantly, who you are, really, really matters. And the impact you're having and the effect that you're having on others is real. And so I know we've talked about a lot of things, and that is the underlying message that I know that all three of us would love to convey, is that the impact that you have is real and it matters. So keep showing up, keep taking care of yourself and filling your own cup so that your overflow is such a blessing to the people around you. Nate, Mitch, thanks so much for being on. And again, just thank you for who you are in the world and how you continue to show up. It continues to impact me. And I know at this point, millions of other people.
Thanks, gents. Thanks for reaching out. Appreciate it. So good to spend time with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.